Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio. I am your host, Royce White, here at Free People Radio in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota. We are snowed in today, but we have a great episode lined up for this family and friends Friday. The day is February 23rd. No, sorry, February 24th, the year of our Lord 2023. And I couldn't be more excited about today's episode. We are still working out a lot of the technical the technical side of our family and friends guest episode for Skype, and a lot of our guests are going to have to come by way of Skype, especially in the heart of the winter here in Minnesota. Hard to fly in and out of Minnesota, even if the weather conditions permit. People don't want to come to the tundra in the dead of winter here. But that being said, while we work out some of our Skype technical difficulties, we've decided to open up the studio here to bring some guests in studio, which I hadn't originally planned for this podcast necessarily, maybe some other ones that are going to come in the future. And we couldn't have had better timing for this Friday. We couldn't have had a better matchup this week for this family and friends episode. I'm joined here today by the great AJ Barker. The great AJ Barker, who I got to give you guys a little bit of a backstory here, right? AJ Barker is my best friend, brother, no doubt. We're family by any metric, and will be the godfather of my two children in the future at some point. Still working on getting them baptized. I have to fight their mother a little bit about getting them baptized Catholic or Protestant. All right, so we're ironing that out, but I guarantee I'll prevail in the end. But anyway, we got AJ Barker in the studio today, and this is a man who I've known for the better part of my substantial life. Since we were 14, 15 years old. We went to high school together. Before we went to high school together, we played basketball with each other and against each other. He was a fierce competitor on the basketball court. That's how I first met him. And he was an even better football player. I know he'll probably contest that, say that he was just as good in basketball because he's a beast like that. But I remember the first time, I'll just share a little story with you. I remember AJ went to you went to Mounds
Park Academy.
Park Academy,
school.
right? Mounds Park Academy is a private school here in the Twin City area, greater Twin City metro area. And you were playing varsity at a younger age, ninth grade.
Yeah,
so
8th and 9th grade.
8th and 9th grade is playing varsity. So when I came and I was playing varsity my freshman year at De La Salle, I was not starting varsity. I was the sixth man. But I still played substantial minutes, and coach was kind of making me earn my way. That's how Dave Thorson is. I'm sure we'll have some good Dave Thorson stories over the course of this podcast. But Dave was making me earn my way, and we had 8 seniors on that team at De La Salle, so I kind of had to fall in line in that regard. But I remember being a 9th grader, and we would play Mounds Park Academy, and Dave was a meticulous film guy. I mean, he had film from years past. He knew what coaches ran. He knew what guys were playing, and we'd be in these scouting sessions when we played Mounds Park Academy. And I remember watching, and it's this kid, AJ Barker. He's a real player. He's a real threat. You got to get up on him. You got to guard him. You got to close out. This kid can do a little bit of everything. And, as a competitor in 9th grade, you're kind of like, yeah, okay, yeah, whatever. I ain't no kid from Mounds Park Academy going to be doing nothing. And I'm watching him on film, and I'm like, this kid can really ball. Like, this dude's ill. And then when we played against each other, and it's different when you're watching a guy on film than you see him actually do it live in person. And then we ended up playing together in AAU after both of our freshman seasons with Howard Pulley on the 16U team, which Howard Pulley, for anybody out there who doesn't know, is the stalwart AAU summer Nike circuit program that's been here for 3 decades, and it's hosted all players such as myself, Chris Humphreys, Khalid Al-Amin, and the list goes on. If you were anybody who played basketball in Minnesota, chances are you played for Howard Pulley, or you've been to the Twin City Pro-Am, which was founded and run by Howard Pulley or Renee Pulley himself. So we played on that team together, and then AJ transferred from Mounds Park Academy to De La Salle. and we played together there. And that's where me and AJ's relationship really started to grow, and we started to form a bond. We spent a lot of time together on a daily basis. I was kind of a nomad out there in the streets, you could say, as a young man, bouncing from house to house, and it had little at home issues. I'm blessed to be able to turn out the individual I am. I had a great family, don't get me wrong, but there were some issues, and I kind of moved around, and I spent a lot of time at AJ's house, and Mama and Papa Barker were very gracious to allow me to spend a lot of time at their home and treat me like a son in many ways. And you never know who you're going to find in your life that provides that support for you in your times of need. But anyway, we're brothers by any metric, and we've grown to build a great relationship from there. But the reason why I'm happy to have him on the podcast today, and the reason why I'm excited for you guys to be able to meet AJ and come to know him better is not about our relationship as brothers or family, but more importantly, this man is, in no exaggeration, one of the most profound individuals that I know. And I'm talking across the entire gamut. I'm talking about people I've met, people I've heard, people I've read. Doesn't matter. This guy can hang with any of them, and much of my maturation intellectually, much of the voice that I have now is in large part due to conversations that AJ and I had or started to have some years back, and have built upon, and we continue to build upon. And I consider AJ a partner in all of these endeavors, like Free People Radio and The Last Renaissance, or anything else I do, because one, we're two Catholic brothers, we're real brothers in real life, but also we share a lot of the same ideas, and we've worked on these ideas together. So without further ado, the great AJ Barker's in studio with us, and here's where I want to start, because I know you, and when I sit across from you and look at you, it's throw it all out there for him at once, right? But let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to before we even met, where you were born, how you were raised, kind of the family structure there at the Barker house, your siblings, if at all, young sports, sports as a young man, religion or not religion as a young man. Give us kind of an AJ Barker backstory.
Yeah, born and raised in St. Paul. First off, then also thank you for that great introduction. It's an honor. It's an honor to be here. Always an honor to be here with you. And yep, it's true. I heard a couple priests talking, younger guys talking about friendship, and how friendship, there's an aspect of friendship. It's not just that you get along, but you're sort of open to one another. Like you can call any time of the day. And, out of my list of close friends, the one that most fits that bill, as you know, is you, where it's like any hour of the day, we might call one another and just talk and catch up. And we do it regularly, all the time. More than even, siblings, that I have, probably that you have. And so it's a really deep and meaningful bond that we share. And I mean that. And so, yeah, anyways, backtracking now. Born and raised in St. Paul, mother and father, two brothers, one older, one younger. Was raised Lutheran, and that largely just means that there's a sort of lip service given to the order of priorities. I remember this one would always come up. It's God, and then school, and then sports, and then friends, or something like that. God, school, friends, something in that range. But in terms of what you do and what you live, it's quite clear, certainly from the kids' perspective, that it's sports, number one, and then friends, and then school. From the parents' perspective, it would be like school, and then sports, friends, and then God. But for a lot of people, like what that means, having God at the top of that priority list, would be totally disorienting to try and have to answer. And the lived reality for myself and most people we know is just that, as a consequence, it's out of the picture. They wouldn't have the intellectual tools or a framework to even begin to address that question sort of conceptually. How do you put God at the top, and how does that feed into all the other things? How does that inform and shape these other things. They wouldn't they wouldn't even necessarily have terms like worldview or how worldview formation functions in the individual person or their mind or things like that. But I digress for now. I'm sure we'll get into stuff like that later. Grew up. Top priority was sports. I was a guy that baseball in the summer, football, baseball, soccer, football, basketball. Would play golf. Would go skiing and snowboarding. Played some hockey. Pretty much played every sport. And excelled in probably all of them. But was gifted with a good not just bodily kinesthetic ability, sort of coordination, but also competitively. I mean, I was very intense as you know, and we have some funny stories of things popping off with Dragon Ball Z video games and whatnot.
Yeah.
But
uber competitive.
Yeah, but very, very competitive and very ambitious with my competitiveness. And to kind of actually bounce forward, I think what's interesting about childhood, yes, it's the things that go on, but a lot of what's happening in childhood, it takes time to make sense of as you get older. So it's not just that your older self is sort of reshaping or reforming it. It's that your older self gets strapped with tools of understanding, sort of skills of the intellect to be able to draw out underlying sort of causes and deeper causes of things. And so what's most interesting, I think, about my childhood is the lens at which I can now look back and see these sort of significant inward moments that shaped the person I would become, not the person I would become to who I am today, but the person I would become, the trajectory I was on to my mid-20s, and what would have continued on without the grace of God and the grace of conversion and the sort of reorienting of perspective, worldview, practice, any number of things. So in that vein, I'm gonna drop here the reference to St. Augustine and his Confessions. It just savage the way he goes back to his childhood and highlights these stories and these details and what he sees about them. So, I always tell people when I'm talking about St. Augustine, he tells the story of stealing pears from a pear tree when he's a teenager. And I mean, I did that. It wasn't pears, but stealing clothes, whatever it is. Line up the list of sins, and I'm checking them off multiple times each. But what he says is he goes, no, I didn't steal that pear because I was hungry. Me and the boys were out, we're rolling around. We didn't steal those pears because we were hungry. He goes, it had nothing to do with that. We stole it because we wanted to steal it, because we knew we could. We wanted to assert ourselves. And what he gets at is this sort of deeper nature and reality of sin than the sort of one you'll be fed, which is, well, yeah, people steal food because they're hungry, or they steal clothes because they're naked and they have nothing to wear, or they steal this because they're blah blah blah. And then all of a sudden you get to, well, what about rich people when they do it? And it's like, well, that's greed. So there's greed, and then there's everyone else, and yep, I would have thought that the cause of evil in the world is largely pinned on greed, which is a cause of evil, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But it's not the principal cause, right? That's pride, and it's not alone amongst causes.
Multivariate.
Yeah. And so, now I look back, using that Augustine story, I look back and I can see where certain events happen, where certain schisms occurred. And, I think over the last year or so, I've found myself reflecting on this sequence of sort of schisms that occurred, first of which happened fifth grade year. I'm playing basketball, AAU traveling, and, I get mad, and the coach is kind of doing platoon subbing. which I don't, that's sub everyone in, take everyone out.
Yeah.
And I
Five
come
in,
out.
five
Yep.
out.
I come out and I kick the chair because it's intense part of game. I don't want to be coming out. And there's at that young age, there's a big gap between
The
players.
good players and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
not so good players.
Huge gap. And so I kick the chair and the coach, he's kind of an intense guy, but he's like, you ever do that again, you will never play. And the first thing that happened for me wasn't this sort of anger at him or reaction to him, but it was this sort of immediate understanding that, oh, okay, I just need to not show that frustration. So it's not that I can't have that frustration or that I even need to work on the frustration. It's that if he can see that I kick that chair, then he can take me out and he can impose this on me. But if he can't see it, then he can't. And to be frank, it's actually a pretty good skill to be able to sort of suppress emotions. Is a good skill in sports. It's a sign of a strong will, a strong intellect. To be able to do it, to be able to sort of force composure out of yourself, it is a useful skill. But I did that, and the deeper lesson there was that what I'm feeling and what's perceived are not the same thing.
Mm.
What I'm experiencing or what I present to people don't have to be the same thing. That's probably a better way to put it. They don't have to be the same thing. And I can use the one in service of things that I want. I can use the presentation of things in service of things that I want. Major schism, right? Major fracture between the heart, the inner reality, and how you engage the world and how you engage others. So that's a major one.
Fifth grade, you
Yep.
get subbed out, close game. They're doing platoon subbing, 5 out, 5 in, sort of part of this. Everybody needs equal playing time and equality writ large at the youth basketball level, which I can't stand myself. I really don't like that. And so you come out, you kick a chair, and coach gives you a little brow beating, tells you if you do it again, it's you're done playing. And then when you say schism, just again, kind of hone in on what you mean from your standpoint about that schism at that time.
Yeah. So he says if you kick the chair, you're not playing. So my response is, okay, I just have to make sure that I cross my T's and dot my I's on my external behavior.
So you're saying the schism
was that now I said, okay, my internal world can be feeling one thing and what I do can be something separate. And so then I can use what I do to manipulate the things around me, the things that I want around me. It's very subtle at this point.
So you're saying you're separating the spirit from the physical self.
Yeah, but
right
typically,
I
think prior to that, my response would have been, "Oh, if you kick the chair, you come out." I would have said, "Oh, but I'm angry," and I would have thought, "Okay, I need to shift the anger. I need to work on that anger in some way." As a young kid, I would have thought, "Okay, if my dad tells me, hey, you can't do that," I would have thought, "Okay, well, why?" Or I would have asked a series of questions. At this point, I go, nah, let's not get into the why. Let's just, okay, I just won't kick the chair and we'll be good to go. And that's what I mean by now a schism, a fracture has occurred. Because up to that point, the expectation was, well, yeah, if I change something, I need to be integrated inwardly and outwardly.
Mm-hmm.
And now I realize I don't have to be. Someone doesn't have to be. And frankly, I am going to sign off on not being it. Right. This is the reality of sin. It's never what happens to you. That's what Christ says. It's not what goes into the body that defiles, but what comes out of the heart that defiles. It is not the things that happen to you. It is the will. It is the intellect and the will that are the principal cause of sin. Okay. And so that's what's happening. That's the deformation in my will, my intellect, my conscience that occurs right there. 5th grade. And that's a real example. That's not a made up example. That's not like a thought experiment. Yeah. Like here's how it would play out. No, that literally happened for me. Okay. Fast forward now. There's going to be 3 areas where this occurs. So we have that sort of general schism. Then we get to 7th grade. And up to that point, I only ever did all my homework. I didn't even consider not doing all my homework. I just did all of it. I wouldn't have even thought to not, like, I would have just applied myself. And
Yeah.
of course, we're talking through 6th grade, but I just did all of it. 7th grade, I go, and it's in that same vein. I go, you know what? I'm not sure that all these classes mean much to me. And I'll tell you what class, and I think this is a normal experience for people that are sharp in our modern age. They look at math and they go, okay, there's something sort of more objective in the math classroom. I can do it or I can't. I don't have to be sort of arbitrarily mediated by the teacher telling me. Again, writing, things like that, they seemed too arbitrary. They weren't taught in a structural way. We weren't given general grammar or the sort of, classical education trivium model of language where it's mixed in with logic and then rhetoric is the presentation. We didn't get that. The grammar as the elements, logic as the interplay of the elements, and then rhetoric as the presentation or the application. We didn't get that. So there wasn't anything intellectually stimulating about it. It just felt arbitrary. So I didn't care for English class, for reading, the list goes on. But math I really liked. So I go, okay, well, I'm going to do that work because it seems valuable. I want to do that work. I want to get better at math. I like doing that. And so I go, okay, well, I got A's in math throughout grade school, high school, tested out of everything in math, like excelled in it. But then the other classes, it was like, no, the threshold for here is enough to get a good enough grade that it doesn't interfere with playing sports. So like a C or a B, which again, if you're pretty sharp, you can coast by through that for the most part. Even if you're not that sharp, you can coast through a lot of that.
Especially nowadays.
Yeah. Well, and even more so nowadays. Yeah.
Increasingly.
And so, okay, so second one there is 7th grade. Now I'm doing what I want when I want. And by the way, I think it's also clear that at this point now, a certain sort of drag of life enters into the picture. What we could say is kind of a subtle or a covert depressed spirit starts to enter into the picture. So I want to sleep more. That's not just because of puberty. I'm sorry. It's not. And as much as they sell you that, it's not. These were wounds of sin to my soul, deformations of my soul and how I approach the world that had this real effect, a real physical experiential effect on me. And now the buck was already starting to come due. Okay. And so we get to, middle of 7th grade, and now all of a sudden, basically as soon as I could masturbate and it seemed realistic to me, I know some people maybe are earlier, but that was 7th grade, I started. So there was no gap of time between now, the sort of onset of sexual desire and masturbation. I basically sinned in the first moment, right? In the first moment, it's like
you were chomping at the bit.
Sinned. Now there's no barrier between it. And so that would be the third area. And here's what's interesting about that, which I think explain in kind of an interesting way.
Please.
Is that the way I oriented myself toward girls who I had a crush on changed at that point. So prior to that 7th grade advent of the sin of masturbation, shall we say, and that deformation of sort of sexual inclination, all my crushes going all the way back to 2nd grade. 1st grade is the first one where second grade, I can remember this girl who I had a crush on, and I would always envision like a family and a life with them, like, and I just wanted to be around them.
True romance.
I wanted the whole
Storybook.
person, right? Again, I can still feel that experience of that sort of attraction that was there. And through 5th grade, so, and I always say those girls who I had the crush, it's like, no, I was too nervous to talk to them, and I didn't have trouble talking, but it was like, no butterflies, and it overwhelms you in a sense, and so no, don't say anything. After 7th grade, the advent of sexual sin. Now what happens is, again, another schism occurs, a break, a fracture, and what happens is that I have girls who I have a crush on, and then everyone else who maybe I could get with or not get with, right? And these are two different buckets. And the girl who I have the crush on, I'm still probably kind of nervous to talk to them, or I talk to them some, or every once in a while I have breakthroughs, or sort of serendipitous moments that allow some of those to emerge. But then there's this whole bulk of interactions that have nothing to do with it. They're based on a sort of lust metric. And not even necessarily the attractiveness
stop,
as much as
stop.
Yeah. This is cutting right through to it. I know it.
This is the most thorough. I've been on a lot of podcasts.
Yeah.
I've watched a lot of podcasts. I've seen the whole introduce yourself
Yeah,
to us,
yeah.
tell us your backstory. This is why I brought AJ on the podcast this week in the early stages, because nothing says, please call me crazy. And when I say please call me crazy, as a brand where we do deep insights and deep dives, nothing that I've ever experienced is such a thorough examination, introspective examination of one's own experience. Continue. I'm sorry. I had to throw that in there.
No, but part of the reason too is because if we just tell my story, why is that interesting to someone? If St. Augustine's writing his autobiography and it's just random details, who cares? That's done with at least within 20 years.
No doubt.
People who knew him, they don't care. But the Confessions hangs around because it hits different. It hits for you. So when I'm talking about this stuff, one, it's a sort of forthrightness with my own sin, with my own experience of sin, my own culpability in sin, which is a humble and God-fearing thing to do.
Yeah.
And so it's good to encourage people to truly do that. But then the other part is that, then it's just relevant. We're talking in a sort of universal way about the human experience.
No doubt.
And the practical implications of it. So that's where that kind of comes in for me.
Yeah.
It seems clear to not just give details, but let's get right into that. And so, so the schism now has occurred, right?
You got girls in two buckets. You got the girls you have the true romance ideal of, and then you got the girls who you can.
And that's going to carry out until I start to, through grace, through those understandings of the Catholic faith, confession, the practice of the sacraments of confession, things like that, start to merge them back together, reconcile those things. By reconcile, I mean acknowledge my culpability and guilt in that sin. You will never get over a sin if you don't recognize your culpability in it. If you just think you're listing off things that you've done, you haven't yet gotten to the core of it. The soul, the spirit will not be transformed yet, right? So part of the process of God giving the grace to heal you of sin is that he's going to bring you through the process that actually heals that inclination in you, that whole orientation of the will. And he's going to turn that will toward God. And it's going to come piece by piece. And so big is understanding that role in sin, not the things that happened to me or the things, et cetera, but where was my will active and where did it move and where did it break? And so 7th grade, that happens. By 9th grade, I'm smoking marijuana regularly because now the spirit is depressed in me, right? And I didn't feel it. I never felt depression at that point in my life. That's not going to come until after football implodes for me. But the story actually picks up pace now that we can get through those early moments. Freshman year comes around, and now marijuana is sort of obvious to me why I would do it. It sort of brings a sensation of peace to an otherwise turbulent and sort of pervasively dreaded inner experience of being. And a whole lot of copes are going on, right? Subtle ones I'm not even aware of to kind of keep me going through it. And the largest of them all was the sort of hanging the hat on the sports thing. All right, I'm just going to put everything into this bucket. And it's just going to be sort of one thing after another. Eventually, fast forward, right? Go to the U of M to play football. I walk on because I don't have the Big Ten offers. And I think I'm a Big Ten caliber football player, but I don't have the offers. I have smaller school interests, some offers and things like smaller schools and military academies and Ivy Leagues, which don't offer scholarships. But, to get into a Harvard with a 3.3 GPA is definitely, a benefit that they give to certain athletes, things like that. But so those are all there, but I go, no, I want to play in the Big Ten. And I don't have offers. And to me, it seems clear why I don't have offers. And namely that, I'm a 6'1" white guy, skill player from Minnesota. It's probably just not going to come this way. The bias is going to be enough for a coach recruiting, trying to evaluate not just what that person's doing, but in relation to the people they're going against.
A little reverse racism there, huh?
Yeah,
No, it does. It does exist. I mean, look, let's just be honest. It's in sports. sports is the one place where you have this sort of reverse racism. I mean,
Yeah.
let's not even call it racism in the traditional sense.
I would just call it biases.
There's a pretty
what I mean?
baked-in bias
just, yeah.
against white athletes, especially in football. Basketball is a little bit. Basketball, it actually could help you.
Both of
in
them,
some
it depends
cases,
on what position you're in,
no doubt,
what the mold of your playing style is,
and who came before you that was white in that position that they could liken you to.
Yep,
like
absolutely.
if you're a point guard in basketball and you're kind of wily and kind of moxie, and they'll be like, oh, Steve Nash or Pistol Pete or John Stockton.
But if you're a white point guard and you're trying to Russell Westbrook it, they're like, no, we don't have a role for you, and you're not what you think.
Pure athlete, just strong, explosive.
I'm gonna shoot more shots than I need to shoot because that's just the energy I'm bringing.
Yeah,
but I'm coming like that.
Yeah, you're out.
Every time,
you're
over and over again.
You better be scoring. But keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Football, it's if you're a white guy, we want you to. It's not just we want you to be sort of crafty, between the hashes type of slot player. It's also a demeanor they want you to have. We don't want any excess of ego coming from this guy.
It's like a typecast. It's like a typecast of athletes.
And my
So
thing was,
corny.
you know how I played basketball. It was guns blazing, and football, it was the same thing.
Yeah.
It was, no, I'm going to be the outside receiver. I'll go in the slot, but I'm going to be the outside receiver. I'm going to go straight at this guy. He's going to know it's coming. I'm going to find a way to beat him, and I'm going to find a way to try and make it look as easy as possible. And the easier I make it look, the more proof it is that I've dominated that person. And that's something that's lost nowadays, because nowadays, if you walk into a touchdown, people are more likely to be like, oh, okay, whatever. Good play, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And if you walk into multiple touchdowns, okay, whatever. But if you make one really hard, phenomenal touchdown, it's going to go viral. People are going to talk about how good you are. People who don't know anything about it are going to talk about that, right? And that's a shift that's happened between the sort of substance of competition and the sort of accident or effect or the sort of glamour that comes along with what's supposed to map onto the substance of competition. But we, across our society, have fixated so much on the external. We've abandoned the internal so deeply, so pervasively, that's all that's left. And so, I mean, another digression there, but I get to the U of M, I'm on a mission, and I come up with certain schemes, multiple schemes of how I'm going to get through this. Some of them are going to be tactical from a sort of football perspective. Some of them are going to be tactical from a sort of emotional, competitive perspective. And then some of them I'm just going to sort of harbor, which, again, by my experiences is and what I've read too of other things and heard other people, a pretty universal human phenomenon where we, in psychology, they might call it the shadow self, the self of you that you're embarrassed of. And the sort of flip side of the shadow would be something like the ideal self or the grandiose self. And this person, we call it the narcissistic persona. And this person's going to sort of cape up for you and avenge you. And when the time is right, like he's going to step in and you're going to be, hero. Great. If you're ever wondering for a great work of literature that doesn't get promoted, Dostoevsky's The Adolescent, or sometimes translated as The Raw Youth, has this character, Arkady Dolgoruki. I don't know if I pronounced that right. It's in Russian, but and the main character is this young 19-year-old, and he's kind of getting humiliated by all these different things in life. But the saving grace that he has from it's not a grace at all, but the secret that he holds is that he has an idea. He understands this idea deeply. And this idea is the thing that he can use to get through whatever moment he wants. And that idea, the idea that he has, is that when I become like a Rothschild, when I become super, super rich, I won't actually, it's funny, I won't actually humiliate people on account of that. It's the exact opposite. Then I'll be able to take with humility whatever someone throws my way. If someone, laughs at me or spits on me, I'll know that I'm a Rothschild. Mm-hmm. They don't know, but I know. And I mean, that's the motif of every superhero movie that we watch nowadays. When they're Peter Parker or they're Clark Kent and they get spit on or they get humiliated, what do? They're calm. And you as the audience member, two things are happening. One, you're calm because you go, oh, if they only knew that's Superman. Right. Really, this guy's good to go. He's not actually vulnerable. And then the second thing it does is it fires up that sort of vengeance, that desire for recrimination to get back at someone. So you're sitting there and you go, oh yeah, good. Just wait. At the end of the movie, he's gonna crush that guy. That guy's gonna know, and he's gonna it's gonna be overtaken. So this is a human phenomenon, but that's, I did the whole gamut of them through college. I got schemes from a practical standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, from a psychological standpoint, and I'm using these to get through and to leverage my way into playing time. And every vice is sort of growing alongside all of this. So we really have a sort of consummation of sin and vice in my life, and it's coming. And I get all the way to the point where, we get to the first game of the year, junior year, and it sat me the whole previous year. Played some as a freshman. We go through coaching change. Sat me the whole second year, the whole sophomore year with the new coach. I had a hamstring injury in camp, and he's like, we just got to see what you do in camp, and you weren't in camp, so we're not going to play you for this whole year. And so there's a year gone. You don't have any leverage. Certainly not as a walk-on in the Big Ten. And so we get to the junior year, and I'm scheming now. Little things like in terms of practice load, right? I know that there's no barrier to the practice load that they're going to put on players. So I'm literally in summertime planning ways to insert false injuries that aren't real injuries, just so I can curb the workload time through fall camp, because I know it's going to wear down on these other players on my team, which it did. They're going to get injuries, but because of, I have this nagging calf thing that I don't actually have. But this nagging calf thing, hey, I got to shut it down. Practice for an hour and a half, I got to shut it down. And the coaches are kind of annoyed, all right, but I'm getting through, and then the bodies start falling. And then you're left at the end, and, there's 5-6 guys, and I've outperformed everyone. And by that home stretch, then you're going full stop. So there's no curbing it down the stretch, but now you've rightly sort of worked into it. Okay. And now we go into that first game, and they have one guy come off injury, and they take me from the number one receiver. They don't move me to the second receiver. They cycle me all the way back to this guy's backup. So they don't move. There's 3 receiver positions. They don't move me to one of the other ones. They cycle me to his backup. But then the game comes around, and punt return, the same thing happened. I was punt return and then go into the game, and they go, okay, you're the number 2 punt return. Well, the first guy fumbles the punt return. So, all right, Barker, you're in. And I go on to not fumble a single punt that whole year. I catch everyone on the fly. I'm either first or second in the Big Ten in punt return yards average per game, and receiver. We're playing UNLV. I catch a hitch and take it for 40 yards. And then the next series, catching out of bounds, falling out of bounds, one toe touch, catch another 40 yards downfield. Then I make another 20 yard. I finish the game with 100 yards. Okay, good game. We liked what this guy was doing too. He finished with 7 or 8 yards or 13 yards, but we feel like he was on the cusp of doing just what Barker did. Okay, so we get to the next week, and
hold on, you got to pull this mic right up on.
Yeah.
Because this is.
We get to the next week, and it's a little more of the same. I do well. We beat the team, but it's okay. We'll see. And then the third week, go into it, 3 touchdowns before halftime, 100 yards, 3 touchdowns before halftime, and now it's pretty much settled. There's a chasm between me and the rest of it, and now it's okay. Well, we'll move them around different positions. Still not just getting the ball in green light scenarios. It's 3rd and long. Okay, fine, we'll go to Barker. Okay. We need this. I'm never getting any of the sort of breakout plays before the 50-yard line. So I'm never really getting to mount the stats like I really know I would be doing out here. But it starts going, and it's starting to separate 2 then from the Big Ten. And so at that point, right, I vindicated the fact that when I was in high school and I said, no, I think I'm a Big Ten player. I'm not just a Big Ten player. I vindicated that, here's a good,
few times over.
Yeah. Here's a good digression.
10
right?
times
Here's
over,
actually
yeah.
a good digression. The star rating system for prospects: 5-star, 4-star, 3-star.
Yeah.
Scam. But what a 3-star means is that in your college career, you will be a contributor on your team. What a 4-star means is that in a Power 5 conference, you will be a starter on your team. What a 5-star means is that you will be one of the top players in a Big 5 conference. Right? That's what the rating system fundamentally is supposed to mean.
In football.
In basketball too.
Oh, okay.
That's the same, like 5-star tiers. You're supposed to become a top player in a Big 5 conference, Power 5 conference, right? And then if you're 4-star, like you major contributor, in a Power 5 conference. So right, you get the 5-star rating for basketball, you become a superstar in the Big 12 and nationwide, right? So here I am at football. It's not just that I'm contributing at the Big 10 level. It's killing people week after week.
And they'll try and say you were a late bloomer, but really they had typecasted you and there was a bias and they never really gave you a genuine shot to show the skill that you have.
And even when it's going good, it's still not.
And they'll
even
come
the
up
same,
with all.
It's still not even the same.
This is
shot.
crazy. As an athlete, I've seen this a lot of times. I don't mean to cut you off, but I've seen this so many times. Everybody for all you out there who aren't huge sports fans, I know some of you are, but some of you may only know about sports in a more passive way. Everybody in sports has this sort of narcissistic view of their ability to evaluate skill, talent, situations, whatever, the whole gamut. And so, I've seen multiple times where a guy like Isaiah Thomas, for example, little Isaiah Thomas, who was smaller, undersized, but was a pure scorer, just a gamer. He's a gamer. I remember when we were, and Jordan Taylor's going to hate me for mentioning this, but Jordan Taylor went to Wisconsin. We came up through the circuit together. We played on Pulley. Jordan Taylor was a phenomenal player. He was a very good college basketball player, had a very good pro career in Europe, could have probably played in the league if his circumstance had been appropriate. But Isaiah Thomas gave him 50. We were out at the
and this is Isaiah Thomas, who averaged 28 points a game for the Boston Celtics.
Yeah,
so
I mean, this guy
in retrospect, you can go, okay, it makes sense.
He's a pure scorer, and he's game.
And had to go to Washington.
And he had to go to Washington. Well, I mean, whatever they came up with, whether it was academic at the time, your academics were such a big deal.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have good grades and a good ACT, then there were red flags about your character.
Yeah.
Now they don't even take ACTs anymore.
Yeah, number one for anyone.
For nobody, ACTs out.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, Isaiah put 60 on us, and I never guarded him. I mean, I was never guarding him. And that's not to say I could have guarded him at the time. Nobody could have guarded him. He was just an amazing player. Right. He was like a Jimmer Fredette or like these guys who had these streaks.
I remember watching him at the Boo Williams.
At the Boo. Oh, you were there.
I was there.
Yeah, you were there.
I was there. I remember watching, and not just against us. We would all gravitate to his court to watch whatever game he was playing because we're like, this dude is electric.
This dude is amazing. Yeah, and he's tiny. For those of you who don't know, he's tiny. Maybe still tiny.
5'8", 5'9".
He's the same height today he was then. Didn't grow an inch. I don't think.
Killing people.
Killing. Lefty, too. Really hard to guard. Okay. He falls to the last draft pick in the NBA.
Yeah.
Okay, this is just to give you guys a framework of what Barker is saying here. This is what we as athletes on the inside know, that, yes, there are players who are given 5 stars coming through high school who deserve it, who end up panning out. But all of it is a speculation for the most part.
I would put it this way. The people who become great players at the pros are great players. Right?
Like LeBron was a 5-star. Okay, we get it.
Yeah.
There's
and if you become great, yes, you might have had the red carpet rolled out for you. No doubt about it. But to become great, the sports are very competitive. And so you have to really, I mean, what you see way more often is coaches or GMs or the media wanting to crown someone as great, and they just can't do it.
True.
You see that way more often. But when someone really becomes great, they're really great. Basically everything underneath that.
Yes.
Is a Ponzi scheme.
No doubt.
And I'm
wait,
like,
don't let me. No, wait. Let's not get off. For those of you who don't know, AJ and I co-authored a book, MMA X NBA, and I want you to go to Amazon now because that book is available. I'm not even going to because AJ is going to have to run right around the 2-hour mark, and I know we're going to go there because we haven't even got into what we're really going to get into, but I don't want you to dive down this Ponzi scheme of sports because then we'll just we'll be off on a tangent. I know it just because we're so passionate about it because we both came through as athletes and we both experienced this corruption. But back to your college story. So So
Which
basically, you were recruited as a okay, he's good at football. He's good at high school
Yeah,
football.
yeah.
He can play wide receiver as a
Yeah.
high school white kid,
Yeah.
but in the Big Ten, there's no way.
Yeah.
So he walks on.
And
I
you
know
could
the
even say-
narrative. I can see
Yeah.
the narrative on the board. I said, AJ, yeah, he works hard in the weight room. He shows all of the skills. He shows all the abilities.
Yeah.
But we know when he's out there with the real dogs, he's going to crumble.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then you're getting out here slowly but surely, incrementally. You put in this diabolical plan behind the scenes that is one of the
Yeah.
most scary things I've ever heard somebody
Yeah, right.
say in person. To be
Right.
honest, you're
Right.
goddamn, frightening. But I love you for that because I know it takes a dog to actually.
Napoleonic.
It takes
It's
a
psychopathic. Yeah.
it takes
It
a
is.
dog though. But I'll let you explain it.
Yeah.
So now you're starting to play, and now you're proving that there are players out there who were overlooked, who had
Yeah.
bias, who had typecast, who are actually killers. And if not, you individually are a killer in your
Yeah.
own league.
Yeah.
Like
and
I remember, because at the
Yeah.
time, guys got to remember, I went to the U of M my freshman year as well.
Yep.
And so AJ was walking on and you weren't playing yet. And then once I left the U of M and went to Iowa State, this is when you started killing.
it was just after your time at Iowa
Just
State. But
after.
Yeah.
So I'm
And
here
it
watching.
blew
I'm
up.
seeing the headlines.
Yeah.
I'm going in, checking out the games. And I'm like, my boy is doing work. And it's making ESPN headlines because
Yeah.
you were a walk-on. So it
Yeah.
had a sort of
Narrative to
a
it.
narrative.
But there were all these things that at the same time, right, didn't fit. Like the coaches didn't think I was the hardest working guy. And it wasn't that I didn't work hard behind the scenes, but to them, I had so much pride tied up in it that I actually want you to think that I'm not working
that I'm
hard
doing
so
it
that I
easy.
really beat you.
that this is
Yeah,
easy for
yeah.
me.
And part of it, I mean, this is part of the psychological game of smoking marijuana. You're not supposed to be able to smoke marijuana and excel like that, or certainly not right. No, all right, I'm gonna smoke weed every single day, and I'm gonna do this to you, and I'm gonna feel tired out there, and I'm still gonna do it to you, right? And my grades, well, if your grades got to be good. No. I'm gonna throw in some bad grades. This GPA might not be that good, and I'm still gonna do it to you. And then we're gonna kind of reluctantly put you and then I'm gonna make plays on third down. I'm gonna well, he's good with he can make the catch, but not that. Nope. Led the Big Ten in yards after catch. Led the Big Ten in explosive plays. Led the Big Ten in red zone plays. Right. Touchdown conversion rate was the highest. Like if you go to advanced metrics, it actually gets crazier. The story gets crazier. And
I hope you guys understand what type of hitters I got around me. This guy right here is a hitter.
And for me though,
And the Big Ten, to throw this in real quick.
yeah,
At that time, right, the SEC and the Big Ten was a monster.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the Big Ten was and I'm not following today as much as I should maybe,
Sure.
but to me, it seems
me.
like there was a time where the SEC just started to run off with it. But
Yep.
right around this time, the Big Ten was still kind of right in there.
Yeah. The SEC is and has been for the last 20 years.
The premier.
Kind of, yeah.
But the
a
Big
league of
Ten
its
was
own,
still
but-
duking it out at that time.
And
Now
if you
they're kinda-
if you go look at pro rosters, the Big Ten and the SEC are by far the dominant, and they should do the statistic at some point. But they're the dominant
Conferences
players.
in-
They're the
in-
dominant
in-
players in the NFL.
Yeah.
Starting lineups
Yeah.
across the board. I mean, you're gonna see it. Every other lineman's gonna be from Iowa. A couple all-pro linebackers that you love to play are going to be Wisconsin or Iowa or Purdue, or defensive ends that you love are from Purdue, or quarterbacks are coming. So even Big Ten to SEC from an individual player standpoint, it's always been right there.
Right.
Always. I mean, and so so it's it's top players. You got to be good.
So
to-
you're
to
killing.
make plays at
So
that
you're
level.
killing in that.
And for me, so I'm killing it. I'm thinking this career is I got a long career ahead of me because the game of football suits me. I like the intellectual side of it. I'm not someone who's like, but film, and I'm like, no. I like that. Like I like the scheming. I like the plotting. I like the anxiety of it, the
Clearly,
build up,
yeah.
the sort of.
Clearly, yeah.
I love it. So I'm like, I'm here for the long haul. And so I get an injury. I get tackled in the end zone on a 64-yard touchdown where the ball's underthrown. I break a guy off and the ball's underthrown by 10 yards. I have to slow up to catch it, but I still am able to speed up enough to get to the end zone. But the defender recovers enough that at the way end he dives. And as I'm in the end zone, tackles me, falls on me, and I have an ankle injury. And it's not going to be anything too serious, but it's going to take a little while. And the coach, it starts to come to a head with the coach, because now you could say there's more of a balance in the power dynamic. When you're a really good player, that's the other thing. As you get to higher levels, the power dynamic shifts
No doubt.
from coaches to players.
No doubt.
And you see that. And then, when you get to pro levels, the power dynamic for players is
Completely
really
shifted.
high.
Yeah.
It's really high.
It's insane.
And now everything that the coaches or GMs use is going to be, in this way, it gets sort of more psychopathic, because everything they're going to use is going to be smoke screens and manipulation. They're going to plant stories in the media about you now, rather to now try and leverage their advantage over
someone. It's got to be a more covert subversion.
Yeah, they've got to change the game plan so that there's a month straight of you not performing the same way, so that then they can insert. They can't come out in the open and just bench someone like they can in high school, not and retain any credibility, which is going to be the source of their future in that business. So now it starts to balance it, but I don't get along with the coach, and I'm confrontational at this time. We've already talked about my sins. I have a lot of sins at this point, a lot of vices. These are not just good things. These things are deeply rooted. And so we go at it, and I say, all right, I'm leaving. I'm not staying here. Walked on here. What? I don't have an allegiance to you here, and I don't think that.
And he didn't even recruit you.
Yeah. No, he's a new coaching change. Yeah. And I'm for all the success I've had here in this, this one season stretch, like this is the way beginning. If someone really opens up the playbook, it'll get crazy quick. And so I'm all right, I'm leaving. So not only am I leaving though, I'm going, you know what? One of those things that I had sort of harbored as an ideal is like, ooh, if the tables turned, I might just drop a letter on you, but not lie. But I'm going to tell it like it is, and I'm going to come straight at you, because people slither out of coming straight on. So I go, you know what? I'm going to write, here's why I'm leaving. And again, I remember sitting in the meeting with the athletic director named Norwood Teague.
Yeah, I know Norwood. Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and I go, oh yeah, no, I don't want anything to happen to the coach. You don't have to do anything with that. I'm getting out of here. I go, because I don't care. I'm not caping up for, 101 other people or something, or how they're being treated. And I'm not delusional that he's biased. He doesn't like me. I'm not under the impression that he doesn't like everyone. Probably a lot of people he likes. Probably really likes him.
Yeah, it is personal.
Maybe even in a weird way. What do I know? But no, it's personal, and I'm getting out. And so I do that. But when I do that, then you start to understand it. You live it, the sort of blackball apparatus of things. So right off the bat, I'm not getting interests from schools that I would have thought. My original thought was, I'll go to another Big Ten team, right?
Right.
And have my way with Minnesota, right? And no, not a single Big Ten team, which was kind of, that's odd, really. Purdue, I just gave you 130 and 2 touchdowns and a half. You don't want it? Iowa, I gave you 90 yards and, you don't want, okay. The list goes on, right? And nothing, okay. But I get a few stragglers around the outskirts of things. And the best of them was Houston. So I go, okay, I'll go to Houston, which is a better team than Minnesota, worse conference. But, a pathway to, okay.
But wait, before you go there, we're approaching the hour mark here, and I just want to, we're going to get, this is where the story gets interesting, much like mine. It's when I told my story, the first episode, but the letter, so people got to understand that the letter that you wrote went national. It hit the wire, and it was on Reddit, right?
Yep. Okay, it was on everything.
It was on everything, but it went super viral on Reddit, I remember.
Yeah.
And so the letter that you wrote sort of detailed out this dynamic between you and this coach. And so
more
people
broadly,
were listening, and this is how corny. I just want to say this, because I want to try and help our listeners have a framework for how they hear things and deal with things. This is how corny people hear your story and respond. They go, oh, well, it was the letter that the reason why no team wanted him, because he talked about things that happened on the inside, and no coach wants a breach of confidentiality from within their ranks. But And a big part of the whole letter controversy was kind of this double cross and triple cross of the mainstream media that kind of had a political bent building there in Minnesota, or always has had one.
And largely liked it.
They loved it.
The media loved it.
Oh, the media loved it because it told the story they wanted to. But you
and
were
it was
coming from a
interesting.
different angle.
Yeah.
So in a huge part of the letter, for all of you that don't know, you probably could still go read the letter. I don't know if it's still out there, but
I mean,
anyway, this
coach,
coach, Jerry Kill, right?
Yeah.
Called you a fag. And
that was a side detail.
But you mentioned it.
Yeah, only
in the
mentioned
letter.
it. And by the way, didn't even really get that much attention.
But see.
And it wasn't him. Sorry, it wasn't him. It was one of the coaches.
One of the other coaches. Yeah, one of the coaches. So there was
again, it was even that was through hearsay where players go, he just called you. Okay. Well,
and see, but my point is, I just want to throw this in there before you continue. Where I was off in another state, playing at another university, that part of the story matriculated. That part of and we hadn't even talked about it.
Sure.
Like you didn't call me up and go, yeah, this coach called me up, and I'm just, and I ain't tolerating that. And even if you did, your point to him was probably more of a don't think you could punk me, which is rightful for you to think in that situation. A lot of coaches think they can punk play, especially football players more than basketball coaches. Football coaches more than basketball coaches. That's kind of baked into football culture, where coaches are kind of tough and they're kind of on you like that. Basketball coaches aren't really like that. But you'll get a few basketball coaches who do it too. And sometimes you got to check them. And sometimes that doesn't work out for you as an athlete. And sometimes you get tagged as a problem. And sometimes you get shipped off and blackballed. So I get that.
Well, okay. So the real claim, and I said it explicitly, but the real claim was that I was laying out how these manipulative tactics were the real hang up to my success. Manipulative tactics from the coach. And the real reason it carried weight is because of what I achieved. Because I'm not saying that, it's still, I'm saying you guys are wondering where I came from. Here, I'm laying out for you why it didn't come on the scene earlier.
At each step, and the letter laid out at each step how the coach did this and didn't want to let you excel here.
Here was the attitude around me. I was an atheist, and they were all, sort of Southern whatever versions of Christianity there are, and nothing against Southern Christian, but like it was a very shallow Christianity, and I was an atheist, and I was one of maybe 2 or 3 on the team. Football culture is one of the few places left in society at that time where it was a true minority to not be sort of religious. But even if you looked at the people who are religious, it's not that their will has been
clarified,
shaped by their faith. It's not that
Chinos,
that they've been changed by an experience. It's something else. It's some sort of Ponzi scheme. But so for me, there it is. And I'm going, no, this apparatus is real. And here's 3 examples, point blank examples of things that happened that support this hypothesis. So it's actually it's doing thorough intellectual work.
Yeah, you're thorough.
And so that the comment from the coach was one of multiple. It wasn't even the main one. It wasn't a big one. And in a lot of circles, it didn't catch much traction because in the layout of the letter, it actually was just one among many things. And by the way, I don't need to defend that for myself because it was largely mechanisms of my own pride, my own vengeance, my own wrath, my own vicious habits. Are there kernels of truth in it? Absolutely. But they were all warped toward evil ends, either evil toward myself or toward another or toward God. Right. So if someone wants to go, well, actually you did this, I go, yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Like, there were bad motives through and through. I was living with bad motives toward things. I had bad habits.
But in all fairness, and I want you to continue on the story, but in all fairness, and 2 things can be true at once.
Sure.
One, you could have had a sort of unclarified will and improper motive in writing the letter and doing the things, but the letter, the other schools using the letter as a justification to not recruit you was not because they don't want players who are all fucked up in the head that can still produce, because that's not true.
Right.
They'll take a player who's completely fucked up in the head that can still produce, and in fact, they actually would prefer a player who's somewhat fucked up in the head and can still produce.
They would, and they would want them messed up in ways that
See that
are
when I
a
see
little
it,
more visceral, a little less intellectual.
when
Let's be clear on
but
that
when I
too.
see it, I
Yeah.
actually what I'm trying to uncover here or just pinpoint is that the same thing I say about Donald Trump, and we'll talk about that another time. But people like that, this archetype of people who tell truth that's uncomfortable. By writing the letter, it was the first stone in the process of you actually putting down
Yes.
on paper what your intellectual formation would then become, and that's what they rejected.
Right.
The mainstream media sold it. They were willing to get behind it because it's that they love it.
Right.
It's controversy. But for the coaches who knew you could produce, their rejection wasn't that you were telling a story that could harm a coach in the general sense. Their rejection was, here's a football player who we already had a bias towards. Now he wants to venture out and be some intellectual, thorough person on paper. We're not gonna tolerate that. So the rejection isn't what people would think. Go ahead.
And it's a combustible dynamic for most of them. They're not going to spend more than a second on it because their instinct is so formed away from anything that would make them feel a sense of vulnerability, and it's so toward things that are secure and easy. And when you feel that you can have sort of a sense of power over someone, you feel secure. And so the more someone shows that, the less the instinct just goes, I'm not sure that I have the power over that person. They say it all the time when they're scouting people for the, do they really love football?
I hate that.
Do they really love basketball? I'm not sure that they really love basketball, which it means to say if they have other things they love, then you might not be able to twist a knife in their back like
No,
you.
and it's
you
really
want.
and that's
You're not going to be able to hold it over.
that's the
them.
part of sports that's really overtly anti-God too, right? It's
Very.
like sports better be central, and you better be a tacitly affirming of God and Christianity or anything else that has any.
Which is
priority.
now gone, weirdly enough.
Yeah,
But yeah.
that's what that is. But continue.
But
So you're transferring now to Houston.
Yep. And then 2 months later, I get arrested down in Houston for smoking marijuana.
I remember.
Yep.
Yeah.
We were down in Houston. You were with the Rockets.
Houston, yeah.
Yep. And so I get arrested down in Houston for marijuana, and now they have kind of the nail in the coffin for the narrative. Okay, but let's just hone in here as if marijuana derailed people's careers, which does bad habit, vicious habit.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Vice.
drugs fall
Sin.
under the vice of gluttony, which is the spoiling of the good for oneself, right? And that's what drugs are doing. So bad real habit. But again, they're not saying, hey, get your life together, as if they're not. It's not that. They're just saying, okay, well, now we have one. At least enough of the narrative can be there that this guy is combustible, which I was, right? We've laid it out from 5th grade through. There's the darkness in the soul.
Mm-hmm.
There's the wickedness in the soul. And now, right, the real point of this whole elongated conversation is to come to this process, my experience with grace and conversion. Because
converting
now,
from being an atheist to being a
because
Christian.
now I enter into about a 3 to 4 year period of intense depression. Now it's not sort of covert under the surface, just kind of disillusioned with life. Now it is overt, and it is in agony, like feels hard to explain, but in another way is very simple to explain. And I think that that's misleading itself, because the simplicity with which one can explain it makes you think that it's actually not that profound. And in many ways it's not, right? But the agony is there day after day. And the thing, right, the principal motive of suicide is to be able to flee a situation, the agony or the anticipated agony of a situation that one has or might have, reasonably would have, right? We'd say that's the good they're going after, is to get out of way of that. And so suicidal ideation, which is just the mind, it's not even just the mind forming the ideas of suicide, but it's informing the ideas of suicide. There's sort of delight at the relief it would bring, right? That's what comes along with it. Now, I could imagine a suicidal action. I can imagine it. My emotions won't connect to it. I won't feel a sense of delight or relief. But so the real key factor of suicidal ideation psychologically is not that you're starting to form the thoughts. It's that you're starting to delight in the idea of the presentation of the thought. And so that's going to be a couple years where I'm really wrestling with that constantly. But the thing I do at that point is I say, okay, I'm taking everything off the table. I'm not going forward with career. I'm not going forward with school. I'm not, the living in the parents' basement. Not only am I going to do that, I'm going to, I can't see why there's more people that aren't canceling everything that they're pursuing to just try and figure out their inner worlds, right? It's now become so clear to me how twisted and agonizing it is. And what's interesting is the presupposition in that is that the things that I'm doing are affecting the experience that I'm having, the experience of agony and despair that I'm having. And I think a lot of people actually, there's probably a schism that occurred of sin in them that dissociates themselves from that, right? Where they actually want to look at it and say, no, there's no connection between what I'm doing and the experience that I'm living through. And certainly that sort of subtle, low grade experience that is a little more constant and stable with us, right? And for me, I go, no, it definitely. So the first thing I got to do is I got to isolate as many variables as I can. So I got to not hang out. I got to stop playing video games. I'd never really played video games that much, but I got to start working on this marijuana habit. I don't need to socialize. I don't need to. All recipes for the psyche to really break down. But it was clear to me that the only chance that I could get any sort of bearing on this was to go through that, was to try and do that and to do it right now, right? Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all the rest will be given to you. It's not, well, let me get the career going and let me get my own place. It's humiliating living in my parents' house, which it is. So, let me just, people can dismiss me. They can dismiss me if I'm living. Yep, they can. All right. But are you going to seek first the kingdom of God or not? And by the way, in a healthy society, the real reason why people wouldn't get drawn back to that wouldn't be because they wouldn't be seeking. It's because the process of growth and nurturing and nourishment, the structure, the way we'd set up schooling, the way we'd set up sport, these dynamics would conduce to the growth of the spirit toward happiness, which is a sort of adult reality. It's an adult human mind reality. It's not that a kid can't be happy. It's that happiness as a stable experience is something for the human being from 25 to 75 or not, or them not to have that, right? But so you would actually be building a society in such a way, and all historical cultures have, they have initiation rites. They have means to try and bring about this process of maturation so that the human mind, the human person can get to that place of happiness in the most direct language there is. And so, so I'm there, and now I'm searching, and I just start reading. I start thinking a lot. I start writing down my thoughts, but I'm writing them down in a way that understands that this isn't about publishing it. This isn't about a sort of external validation I can get for it. This is about me testing what I think is going. So here I'm saying it. And by the way, if that thing's good, then even if no one hears about it 6 months later, it should still be good, right? It should still have weight. It should still be able to affect things. And so I go through this sort of refining process of what I think about things, and starts to get closer. We could say it gets closer to truth. This long sort of multi-year process gets closer to truth. There's huge pieces that had to be totally flipped, which grace is then going to enter into the picture to start that flipping, but also to then carry it along, that flipping along. But we get to about 5 years after football collapses, a couple years of overt depression, about 3 years of good, healthy living, grounded living.
Went back to school, right?
Yep, doing things right. At that point now, conversion occurs.
Okay.
To Catholicism.
So how old are you at the time?
That's 26. I'm 21 when football ends. I'm 26.
Okay.
I'm going to be 27 when I get confirmed. Coming up on 5 years ago now. But at that point, right, it's not a conversion that happens. And by the way, in this process too, there's it's not even just philosophy or theology. There's literature I'm reading. There's a lot of things I'm thinking about, conversations we have. We like to discuss, whether it's movies, music, culture. Like it's such a gift. Our friendship is such a gift because it really has that courage. Both of us, not knowing any better, but having the sort of bravado of an athlete, we precociously and prematurely will dive into any topic.
Yeah, no doubt.
what? Oh, I know nothing about world history. Let's start talking about world history
Yeah.
when we're, 22 or something, 23.
Yeah.
And but from doing that, you experiment with it. You start to figure stuff out. Then you read more. Then you fill it in. And so we go through the, closest friend that I've had over the last 10 years in particular, but then, broader in my lifetime. But so even that is this huge source of sort of testing, experimentation, orienting to things and
Yeah.
starting to
And
figure stuff out.
You'll call me out of nowhere on a Wednesday afternoon and
Yeah.
go, "Hey man, I was just thinking about this." And
Yeah.
we'll be there for 2 hours.
Yeah, we will often have phone calls that one of us starts with, "Hey, I was thinking about this," and they just start going.
Yeah.
Like,
And it's
are you
off the
free?
races.
Are you? We don't know,
Yeah.
but it's just,
Doesn't matter.
hey, I was thinking about this.
If you're not free, if you're busy, you'll tell me.
You'll tell us.
Yeah.
We'll
But
stop.
but if the conversation has fruit, we're
Yeah.
gonna get down to something here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And-
And I think that's and I appreciate that friendship too, but I think that is the real anomaly that exists in our friendship as it pertains to the wider population of people around the world.
Yeah.
Increasingly there, and how we came about it is unique and rare. And,
Yeah.
who has that circumstances? Two guys grew up a stone's throw from each other, started playing high school sports together, went on two totally different paths, but
Yeah.
had the similar undercurrent
Yeah.
from two different directions. But we found that dialogue that we started to build, and it really
Yeah.
ramped up for me when I was in Canada,
Yes.
and the whole Jordan Peterson thing kicked off. And we can talk more about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But the funniest one that I always tell people is AJ Barker is solely responsible for alerting me to the prevalence of atheism in white people in America. And I had come from, and it's funny,
Yeah.
and I still chuckle at it, but it's much more dark and pervasive than I ever could have thought.
Yeah.
And one of the when I realized it, I remember where I was. I remember the exact place I was. Me and AJ, I was in Canada, living in Canada. AJ's living with his parents,
Yep.
still working through this
Yep.
this intellectual process. But we're having these conversations. AJ comes up to Canada to visit, watch me play a game. My family's there. He comes. He gets sick. I remember you got that crazy flu when you came
From
to.
your kids.
Yeah, from my kids.
Yep.
Yeah, and he was.
They got it. I got it.
102 temperature or something. Just cooked over in the house. But we had these long conversations, and we had started to have these long conversations, and they continued. And then I end up leaving Canada, come back, and we continue to have these conversations. But fast forward to the George Floyd situation, the George Floyd uprisings, and I'm in the heart of it. I'm in the belly of the beast, and I'm there, and it dawned on me that my own experience, like my own human experience, was completely off. It still had things missing. And it wasn't that I didn't have a good sense or intuition of things internally. What it was that I didn't have anything to reference from the outside world. I had
Yeah.
become too intellectualized. I
There you
had
go.
kind of went through
That
exactly what
schism.
you went through.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you isolated yourself,
Yeah.
I became isolated, but in a different way, because
Sure,
I had this MBA profile and I was trying to fight this big battle with a corporation where none of my contemporaries and peers would really engage with me, or I didn't have any other relationships.
Yeah.
I was kind of genuinely isolated, and
Yeah.
that provided great insight introspectively,
Yes,
but also
yes.
to the world. But I was missing something, and it took for me to walk out and lead this protest and talk about all these ideas that you and I had discussed
Yeah.
that seemed so obvious to us, and then to hear the response from the
Yeah.
people on the ground. And the first thing that just baffled me, because I had always been a Catholic,
Was how many atheists there are.
was how many atheists there were. And
Yeah.
it was like an open rejection. It was almost like an
No, and that-
animosity. And I was like, whoa, what is this? And I called JJ, I remember in this meeting, and I started talking about this sort of Christian, God, do we believe in God or not? And it was like walking into a room, like, know the room.
Yeah.
That's a common thing you say
Yeah,
in
yeah.
politics. You
Read
gotta
the room.
Read the room. I did not have a read of the room at all. I mean, I said something about God and sovereignty and inalienable rights from the Creator, and the vitriol that started to come toward. Not even like
Yeah,
people
yeah.
were shouting at me, because I'm 6 foot
Yeah.
260. I mean, nobody's really going to buck
6'8".
up. Yeah, they're not going to get
Yeah.
buck with me in a physical way, but I could feel the animosity.
Sure.
And they were like, "What is still talking about God for? We don't believe in God.
Yeah.
What are you talking about prayer for? Why do we need to prioritize prayer at any demonstration
Yeah.
at the Fed?" And I was like, I realized it. And I remember I
Scales
called
fell.
you that night, and I was like, oh my God, you're right. and it's far worse than you could even imagine,
Yeah.
like at a spiritual level. Because we argued the first time. I remember arguing you
Yeah, we
down.
argue.
I was like, yo, I don't care what you say. The statistics say that people still identify as Christian. All the white folks I know believe in God
Yeah.
because I came up from St. Paul Catholic. I know the St. Paul Catholic community. And I had such a crazy view of the world that was completely untrue. I was heartbroken. I was literally heartbroken to
Yeah.
find out so many people were atheists.
And the thing that was the sticking point, it wasn't just that I was saying, no, they say they believe in God, but their presuppositions are that they don't believe in God, right? They live like they don't believe in God. It was, no, I was saying, no, they are
Anti-God.
atheists. Like,
Almost.
like if they don't overtly say it, because many will hide behind the sort of agnostic label. If they don't overtly say it, there are any number of propositions you could test and you would get the atheist response.
Yeah.
Like directly. And if you come straight down the middle, we believe in God, right? Then you might even get the outright no. Like, and not like I don't think so. Like a
No,
no.
see, and this was worse than that.
Yeah.
But maybe it was because of where I was
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the political climate and what that sort of
Right.
drew forth. But where I was, and that's why I call it the belly of the beast, because in this room or in this circle, it wasn't like, oh well, I'm kind of passive on God, maybe not.
Yeah.
Not the
spiritual, but not religious.
not the agnostic thing, not the spiritual
right.
thing.
No.
This was full blown. If you say God around us, you're an enemy.
Yeah.
That's a microaggression.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, these people are psychopaths.
This is my point, and this is because I went through it, and I knew how convicted I was in that atheism, how clear people would ask me, oh, so you didn't believe in God? And Christians will ask me that, and they'll be like, because they're kind of like, you really didn't believe in God? I go, no, the statement I used to say is that I don't think there's a God. That answers it for you. I would literally tell people, no, I'm not even going to say I don't believe in God, because I actually don't think there's a God. My proposition of how the world works, how the universe, how the cosmos works, is one that there is no God. And that's clearly atheism. This isn't a hidden, well, deep down, actually, he probably still believes in. That's not there. It's not happening like that.
Was your affinity? Do you think your affinity for math played a role in that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you want to dive into it, right?
Well, a couple things before, because I know we got
not even a deep dive. No, but
Yeah.
logical positivism.
Okay,
That
was played a role.
Philosophical positivism is the notion that the only thing verifiable is mathematics or empiricism, empirical demonstrable reality.
Scientific method.
This is the dominant philosophical thread in the Western world over the last 200 years, and it's infiltrated top down every single academic institution. It's not Marxism. It's positivism, right? And if you need a little more depth, a little clearer, but not too clear, concise picture of this, read Pope Benedict XVI's Regensburg Address. Okay, you can read that. It's a beautiful little synthesis of the history of philosophy, and especially in the Western world, the de-Hellenization that takes place from the Protestant Reformation through to the 19th and 20th century through to our present day, where we get the sort of moral relativism. All right, but this is the tenable philosophical worldview of the last 2 years. It's called positivism, and it is the idea that the only thing we can rely to for real philosophical inquiry, and by extension all practical inquiry, is things that can be verified mathematically or empirically. Okay. And what then ends up, one of the major consequences that then ends up happening is that religion becomes a personal matter, an entirely personal matter. It no longer has an objective structure, and it can no longer influence community formation. It can't affect it. All right. So it loses its, and this is what Pope Benedict says directly. I think I'm basically quoting him word for word. This is my own idea, right? I'm just pulling directly from it, is that it no longer has the binding power to create and form community. So it can do nothing in the communal sphere. And so, yeah, that's the detailed answer of just, yeah, the mathematics played into it, and being strong in mathematics played into that sense that no. First off, yes, math can be verified, right? It can be logically known. It is, as Plato said, at the door of his academy, no one who's not good at math can enter here. right? Or anyone who's not good at math
Can't
can't
enter.
enter here, right? However you want to play
Mhm.
the double negatives, right? And the point is that mathematics is a sort of testing ground of logical thinking, and it is. It's a good exercise in abstract thinking. If you're in abstract thinking, if you're ever wondering why people should get some rudimentary education, at least in mathematics, that's why, because it's the foundation. It's sort of abstract, sandbox environment of learning principles of thinking. And so yeah, so I was totally involved. I didn't know that philosophical school, so to speak. I wouldn't have been able to articulate in that way, but I was totally convinced that the only things valid and considerable were from mathematical proof or empirical demonstration,
Mhm.
right? And so yeah, I mean, that's
And
where I was.
so what was one of the early turning points for your Catholic conversion?
Yeah,
Because now, I mean, now you
yeah,
teach. Now AJ, for those who don't know, AJ is a Catholic teacher,
a theology
a
teacher.
theology
Yep,
teacher, and at high school,
yep,
at a high school, and you're enjoying that, and
yeah,
you,
yeah,
you rave about that. But what was one of those early conversion points of
yeah, yeah.
Catholic
So
thought?
the earliest uh, point that I can turn to is the encounter with Soren Kierkegaard's treatise on despair, the sickness unto death, where he really lays out a compelling case for both the reality of despair and why there's despair, and the process that people go through to try and get out of despair that exasperates their despair. But so, long story short, and we can dive back into that, but the encounter with despair and in the really big picture, so I'm talking cosmologically, the really big picture, if everything comes to nothing, then at bottom, there's some sort of connection to despair. There's some sort of experience to despair. Okay. That to me would have been verifiable. I could actually go through that and go, yes, okay. If I'm living my life for those around me, their life's going to end. But if we then up it and go the next sphere, okay, well, I'll live for humanity. Okay, well, humanity could likely will end. Well, okay, then it's for the planet. Okay, well, the star is gonna explode at some point. The planet's gonna end. Okay, well, it's for any life in general, or it's for this ideal, or it's for all these things come to an end. So if all these things are passing and come to an end, ultimately, what I'm looking at is nothingness, is emptiness, is despair. And that's going to be the intellectual root of despair. To go through that realization, crystallize that thought, you're going to now have the intellectual foundation of despair. Okay, so there I am. And I go, yeah, but I don't have a counter argument to that. And then I'm learning about Christ, and I think it's fascinating. I'm reading the Gospels and the letters of St. Paul, and I'm reading some uh, modern, you know, psychologizing theologians who say, here's the psychological insight of it. I think it's fascinating, a Jordan Peterson type or something. And this was prior to Jordan Peterson coming on the scene, but I'm reading that, and okay, it's interesting. It wasn't until I encountered Catholic thought, rigid, straight down the middle Catholic thought that goes from Pope Benedict, right? From Joseph Ratzinger, who is Pope Benedict, for those of you who don't know, going, we must insist on the resurrection as literal, for if the resurrection is literal, then there is nothing. And by the way, it doesn't conform with the reality of what the people thought and taught and attested to in the early church. All right. So it's attested to in the Gospels,
Mhm.
right? The resurrection is directly attested to. And St. Paul, at the end of oh, which letter is it? But at the end of the one of his letters, he lays out a sort of profession of faith. And I believe that Christ was, died and resurrected on the third day in accordance. He doesn't say in accordance with the scriptures. The scriptures aren't there yet, but right, he's laying out the sort of profession of faith. Like it was an explicit part. And by the way, in that resurrected body, he's there for 40 days before he ascends into heaven. So he's there interacting with them. They encountered something that they are saying, no, this is what we're actually pointing to. This resurrection literally happened. And by the way, St. Paul also says, if 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 we have this faith for this life only, meaning he didn't resurrect, this is a mechanism to bolster society or things like that. If we have it for this life only, then our faith is in vain and we are still in our sins and we have
Mm,
no hope.
mm.
And that's in the letter to the Corinthians. And I'm well, yeah, that seems obvious, right? If we're not saying that this literal resurrection happened, then we have nothing. And all of a sudden, it started to click for me because I was not only fascinated, I was been interiorly moved by Christ, and not just his parables, but namely his passion and crucifixion, namely someone being accused who's truly innocent, because I could grasp that. The feds show up tomorrow at my house and say, I got 25 kilos in my basement. I'm going to jail, whether it's there or not, whether they planned it or not. If they truly want any one of us, it would be hard pressed. We'd have to be able to demonstrate that they're lying. And then even so, who do you turn to if the authorities are the corruption? You can't, you know, you have to go rogue, but even that, your prospects are grim, right? So I can grasp someone being truly set up. And so I'm going, okay, if this guy's truly set up, truly innocent, and he's put to death, how does he have the composure to ride it out like an absolute G? Not like kind of, sort of taking it, like straight up forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. And tear this house down in 3 days, I will raise it back up. And when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all things to myself. I mean, come on. This is a different level of composure. And now this sort of divine reality of Christ starts to set in, and the resurrection being literal. So the foundation, the resurrection is literal, we must insist on it. And here's these disputes throughout the history of the church that are dealing with that. They're called Christological heresies about the nature of Christ. That's what the church formation over the first 1,000 years is. And even the East-West schism is this deep fight over Aristotelianism and Platonism and Neoplatonism, which, I'm sorry, it's Aristotelianism. And I could take you through that. That would be a longer conversation, but it is what it is. It explains the universe and reality. And frankly, it's not even that close when you get down to the nitty gritty of it. And so that's what the church is going through. And then you have all these things along the way where you're going, belief in Christ is more than even just belief in a resurrection. It's a belief that God has entered human history. And in entering human history, we could say he has baptized, but really he has sanctified human reality. And so he came and established an institution, because institutions are a gift of man. No animal can set up an institution, some sort of structure that endures on across generations. It can't happen. That's grounded in principles and a reality and a real tangible.
They don't have that historicity.
A real tangible, inception point. Can't happen. So institutions are a sort of flourish or beauty of man. And God goes, no, not only am I saving man, I'm going to affect institutions, and I'm going to affect history. And not all, but I'm going to place an institution amidst this reality, which is the Catholic Church, 2,000 years, not only still standing, but gloriously standing, right? And so all of a sudden, actually, these things start to converge in a way where I always say it's not even a close consideration whether Catholic or not. These things come together in a way that I don't even know all the nitty-gritty debates over Catholicism, Protestantism. I know some of them, but even
at that time, you mean?
No, but even now, even when I learn them now, they don't stick for me because I just don't care that much.
Right.
Like, I'm just being honest. Even when there's reference to things, or isn't this sort of, I'm like, I hear you. I could even jot it down. I could practice what you're saying, but I'm not going to pull it up freestyling in a podcast because I'm not going to remember it like that. It's not going to integrate in my knowledge. But the reality that God entered into human history as a person, that he set up these things, all of that it's been there unbroken since his coming. I'm like, it's just kind of got to be the case. I don't know.
On this rock, I will build my church.
Yeah, I don't know how else you kind of retain the actual transformation, saving grace. And I largely think a lot of what you get, and actually there's intellectual backing for it, very serious intellectual backing for this, but a lot of what you get in salvation outside of that sort of sacramental reality of the church, which a lot of people wouldn't even know what that means, but what you get is this sort of aha moment of salvation, where now you're, and it's itself a deformation of both philosophical and Christological and practical understanding. And so again, here we are. You start to see this. You ask, what's the thing that really starts to tip the scales? It's that encounter with despair and then the resurrection. And that in line with what is called consubstantiality is one of those Christological ideas that had to be clarified. The Trinity, which is when you know Christ, you know God. They're the same substance, one being, three persons, right? One divine nature, but knowing Christ is knowing God. And for me, the scales fell. And they fell most of all because now that despair, which I understood and felt, was immediately transformed. Immediately transformed. I can still feel the experience of the despair. I can still feel the experience of the hope in the wake of it, right? In the wake of that transformation, of that understanding. Oh, if this person literally resurrected, right, this is going to change this informs everything. Right. And now I'm going to be able to go back and start filling in over time, filling in a lot of the errors that I held, or subtle errors, or things that were even profoundly converging toward truth, but in the final analysis didn't need one last piece put in place, but actually needed a sort of fundamental stone shifted, right? And that brings us here to today, where Catholic, not only believe in God, but reflect on my whole life and trajectory in a different way, right? I laid out for you guys those different events of sin, right? Of serious sin, of lasting sin, of breaks, because again, we're talking here the sin principally being in the spirit. It's also practically there, right? By extension, any number of practical actions.
Right.
But that the iceberg of sin in a person, it's the top part above the water is like your actions, and they can still be grave and mortal, no doubt about it, where they directly undermine it.
Man.
It's not even just it's the worldviews.
Mm-hmm.
That part that's under the water, the 90% of the iceberg, is the worldviews you hold, worldviews toward ethics, toward sexual ethics, toward even economic realities and political realities. And so you're not going to get the sing the praises, victory lap for the modern Republican Party now, because it's so far off on so many of these things. Now, we can still hold that the clear standing in the breach stance toward abortion is a definitive good, and that in light of there being not another option, it takes preeminence politically. And,
of course.
And you want other things to follow along with it. But no, I mean, like I said, there are real things that world, the Christological conversion, the Christian conversion starts to bring with it.
What were some of the seminal works, the books that you read? What were some of the books that you read early on? I know the Kierkegaard one was in there.
Sickness unto Death.
Let's ask this question, because you and I often joke about the Judeo-Buddhists, and we're at like 2:48, so we need probably another 10 minutes, 12 minutes here, and we could roll out. We're going to obviously have to have AJ back. You guys can see he's a wealth of insight and knowledge and lived experience with self-reflection and growth, maturity, especially from a spiritual standpoint. You and I joke about the Judeo-Buddhism thing a lot, and I know that in the early part of your depression, or in the early part of your reconstruction of your mind, in many ways, your view of the world, you dove into some of that Eastern philosophy. What didn't sync up for you? Once you were introduced to the Catholic thought and the resurrection and the Eastern philosophy. I always find that the way you describe that is very fruitful.
Yeah. Well, the Eastern philosophy has certainly a lot of gems in it, right? Even the Buddhism, you get the fourfold path, the Four Noble Truths. That there is suffering, life is suffering, there are causes to suffering, there's a cessation to suffering. And the cessation to that suffering is the fourth noble truth, which is the Eightfold Path. And that's even that, right? Even the eightfold path is like right understanding, right intent, right livelihood, right actions, right speech, right concentration, right effort, right meditation. Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. I think that's the eightfold path, and I haven't thought about that in a few years now, right? But there's so it's saying, all right, if you manage a number of these things and you get them kind of all integrated and in balance, you will be released from this sort of pervading suffering to life. And the real good of it is that, yeah, if you balance out a lot of things in your life, you make a lot of growth. You make a lot of growth, really substantial growth. Um, but it's still despair. It's going, and not only is it intellectual, it's not like intellectually you just, sign on and go, oh, okay, yeah, the resurrection or everything I've laid out. That is grace alone. Grace alone suffices to raise the natural, which is man, to the supernatural. We cannot do it. Our intellect, which is a natural faculty, can't just lock onto it and we're good to go. No, the movement of the soul toward God must start with God. Now, he might converge a number of intellectual things so that then when it happens, it clicks for you and there's a sort of stability to it. The things align for you inwardly. No doubt about it. That's why it's still worth talking about it, right? Because even talking about it could be enough that starts to set pieces in line where now, boom, when the grace comes, or this could be even the process of grace working in one's life, that now it converges, the scales fall for them, right? But it is grace alone that can move it to that. And the Buddhist answer, the Eastern philosophy answer, a lot of good stuff. You can build out a lot of things, a lot of good natural virtue, things you should work on. You should work on having your life in alignment. It is good to have good, right knowledge, right intent. So good knowledge of things, those are worldview things. Intent, so intent toward things. Livelihood, so how you make your money is going to matter. It's going to matter what you do, right? How you act, what you say, that stuff needs to be in alignment, right? And then right effort, right concentration, right mindfulness. Like, yeah, those are all things that are going to start to build out those different layers of what it means to be a human person, both internally and relationally. And so, yeah, great nuggets in there, and also great sort of pedagogies. So ways of bringing that about, of helping you give insights to break through barriers and plateaus and stages like that. Yeah, it's really good. You will not evaporate the despair through that, no matter how good you balance all those things. And you will have, if you balance all those things relatively well, you will have a good sort of experiential level of contentment with life. Like, things will go more good than they won't.
Yeah.
Big losses will still be particularly confounding. And you'll also have experiences. I can tell you this, you'll have experiences where things are going really well, and you'll have these periods of kind of emotional dread, psychological dread, spiritual dread that will be that much harder to reconcile. So in a sense, they'll be more hopeless because you won't be able to just turn to, well, let me get more things in balance.
Right.
And so that's
I've already reached the pinnacle of having all these worldly natural things.
Okay, I can work more on this, but it's not like when you start the path and you go from being terrible in any number of those things, and now you start to get pretty good. Okay, well, from 95% excellence to 98, it's a small leap, and you're going, man, is this really gonna? And the answer is it's not. Like, it's not ever going to be able to eclipse that.
It's not going to bridge the gap.
So yeah, I mean, what ends up bridging the gap is, well, and you have the westernization of Buddhism and Eastern philosophy, which is a racket itself. It's just a commandeering of mostly Catholic and Catholic intellectual monastic insights that then shape and form how they bring even the good nuggets of Buddhism to the Western world, which are very different than historical Buddhism of the past 2,500 years. And it's different sort of denominations in Zen Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism, and the list goes on, right? Even those things are going to be very different in their sort of incarnated realities, and the practice for people in specific cultures and times and places in history that live those out. It's going to be way different than the reading of your book in the sort of intellectual way, which has been infused with a Christological incarnational worldview. Right. And so if there's even a large semblance between those and that, it's not because the Buddhism is carrying the bulk of the work. It's sorry to say it, it's actually the opposite.
It's that Christ is carrying a lot of the work.
No, it's that it's the fruits of the natural understandings of the Christian heritage that are carrying the bulk of that, because they're sitting there and they're actually, even big things, subtle things, they're tweaking this or that thing into place. Like, oh yeah, we'll relate the meditational to the act of the intellect. And you don't ever have to read that. But for the person who's writing at a deep level, to have those things kind of piece up goes a long way to click things up, right? And they'll draw from then, the Upanishads, which is a Hindu, pre-Buddhist, sort of sacred text in Indian culture, and they'll pull from that. And there's a bunch of regressions in it. Like on the top level, there's, maybe your actions, and then there's your thoughts, and then there's what you feel about it, and then there's blah, blah, blah. And so there's a bunch of regressions. And through that, you'll be able to sort of piece together, if you have the code of the sort of Aristotelian Greek metaphysical view of man merged in the Christian reality, you're now going to be able to go, oh, yeah, great. This Eastern philosophy and Buddhism, it really comes together smoothly and coherently. But the legwork comes from that structure, that rationalism, and I mean that in a good way, the rationalism structure, and the Christian reality of it, which is it's not a matter of opinion. That is John's gospel. That is the entrance, the beginning. The beginning of the Gospel of John is the Greek metaphysical incorporation of that idea into Christian reality. In the beginning was the Logos, or the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It's not an optional philosophy.
Right.
It is the philosophy that even that is then taken to another level to begin to lay the foundations of the Trinity, the realities of what's going on, habits, sanctifying grace.
Intellectual legwork that was done by Catholic theologians.
Well, and in that case, I mean, that legwork's done by John the Evangelist. Yeah, the beloved apostle, and carried on through St. Paul. I mean, it's just.
What do you make of the story? What do you make of the story before we part here and go? What do you make of the story of Christ in his lifetime at some point? I forgot exactly when, traveling to the East and spending time there in the East, in Eastern Asia. Do you think it's a myth? Do you think it actually took place?
I mean, I know it goes into the desert. There's any number of events that would have happened prior to the account of the Gospels, so that he comes on the scene around age 30 in the Gospels, and so there's a stretch. You have some early narrative things from the Gospel of Luke, which Luke was the close companion of Paul and knew Mary, the mother of Christ, well, intimately and well, directly. So he gets some of those nuggets, those details of that early life. But you have a gap, and any number of things that happen. What we know, or what we can point to, as Catholics, other people won't take this as authoritative, but it's profound, is that Christ sharing the divine nature, right? Two natures, one person, divine nature, human nature. His intellect did not work in exactly the same way as ours does. So the way ours works, and this is a longer conversation, which we'll get into at some point. They can listen to some of our podcasts with Tim Gorin too, where we touch on it more. But the rational intellect learns things through senses. Okay, we're in potential toward all concepts. The divine intellect not only apprehends all concepts, it's the cause of all concepts. Okay, what you get in Christ, as St. Thomas lies out, is a merger of what would be the angelic intellect, which apprehends concepts immediately due to the concepts infused in the intellect, and the rational intellect, which is in potential of all things. And so what this actually means is that something like the Jesus of Nazareth had in him all the concepts of all reality. No angel has all of them. He has them as a part of his divine nature. But it was fitting in his human nature to be in potential toward those things, so he still learned them. Here's the key, though. He learned them all by discovery, not by being taught. He had no teacher. That's why in the Gospel of Matthew, after the Sermon on the Mount, and he spoke with an authority, right? You have these lines that come throughout. the Gospels and the New Testament. He had this authority. That's because it's speaking to this reality that he learned all things by discovery, meaning they say actually to learn by discovery is a more sure way of knowledge than to learn by being taught. However, in light of the fact that you're not going to be able to discover all things, and actually you'll even go astray on a lot of things, it's good that you're taught and you're framed by those teaching things. We need that. But in the pure example, it is the more perfect form of learning. And so for Christ, he, in due time, as he progressed, was in potential toward all concepts and discovered the ones either relevant to that particular mission and or all things. And so anywhere he's going to interact with other people, there is a human interaction with them. There's an encounter between that human person of Jesus and those people, and whatever comes along. But it's not like he went to the East to learn something he didn't know, or to learn something from them that he didn't know. So whatever takes place in that situation, which is not canonical. Any journeys he had are not canonical.
Not canonical,
They're apocryphal.
Yeah.
May or may not be the case, but anything we can just fill in the gap that
maybe he did, maybe didn't.
Yeah, maybe
Christ,
he did, maybe did. But when he's there, again, it's not that we can rule out with certainty that he went there and learned and then had to piece it. Oh, okay. Oh, all right. Now I got it. Oh, yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, it wasn't the thing that bridged the gap for this intellect.
No, he could have come into contact with whoever. I mean, it's the same reason why they, in the Gospel of Luke, when he's in the temple and he's teaching the scribes and the Pharisees, these are the most well-studied intellectual juggernauts of the world.
He's just teaching them.
And he is laying them out chapter and verse and connecting the threads. And you should have seen it. It was astounding. You know, as Joseph sort of relates. It's
to close, and then we'll head out after this. I know you got to run. Do you think that the rejection of Christ in Christianity in modern society is envy of Christ, or is it fear of being judged? In the modern contemplative cultural sort of sense, do you think it's a sort of envy of the fact that that there was a chosen one, his only begotten Son, that's a part of the Trinity, and had this sort of divine mission that supersedes any sort of human worldly circumstance, or is it just the fear of being judged?
You'll like this. Like this. I'm just going to give you the full answer. All right. And it'll take a few minutes, but that's all right. We have the 7 capital vices. Okay. Pride, envy, wrath, sloth, greed, lust, gluttony. Okay. Those are the 7 capital vices. They're called capital because capital means head. It means all the sins flow from them, but they're actually distinct. So people would ask the question, and Aquinas addresses this in his book De Malo, on evil. Is it fitting that there's 7? Should there be more? Should there be less? Is it really just one? Is it really just pride? And he says, no, it's quite fitting that there are 7 because it maps onto 7 different categories for understanding where a person can err. Okay. So he says 4 of those categories are going to be in the form of sort of spoiling certain goods or spheres of goods. And then the other 3 are going to have to do with impeding the goods of self, of others, and then the good in general. So philosophically, you can actually lay it out very clearly. So the ones that spoil are pride, which spoils the good of the soul. Okay. Gluttony, which spoils the good of one's own body for themselves. Lust, which spoils the good of the body for others, and technically the others is the species. You're misusing the faculty of sort of procreating and passing on the species. So you have pride, the good of the soul, spoiling the good of the soul is pride. Spoiling the good of self in the body is gluttony. Spoiling the good of others in the body is lust. And then spoiling of material good in general is greed. Okay, on the other side, the ones that impede the good, you have sloth, which impedes the good of oneself. Okay, and then you have envy, which impedes the good of others. Okay, and then lastly, you have wrath, which impedes the good in general. And the difference between the top 2 impetitive vices, we would say, is that the top 2 are aversive. They're under the category of aversion, so trying to move away from the thing. And then the last one, wrath, is in the category of recrimination, which is a sort of fighting back. It's like a fight or flight response. One, aversion moves you away, fight moves you toward. Wrath is the vice that comes along with recrimination. So it spoils the good in general through recrimination. Okay. The reason I say this, I lay this out for you, is because if we ask whether people reject Christ, is it envy? Is it fear? Is it any other sort of thing? What we can say definitively is that at different times, in different ways, and for different people, they hate Christ under different aspects, right? And now the principal ones, it's also worthwhile to say this, the principal spiritual sins are, spiritual vices are pride and envy, because all the other ones are going to involve the body in some way. So wrath requires the passion of anger. You have to have a body to have passions. Okay, sloth arises from a sort of sluggishness in the body, so you have to have a body. Okay, greed pertains to material goods, and then gluttony toward food and lust toward sex, both bodily things. They're kind of the most purely carnal. Are those in particular greed, gluttony, lust. Okay, so again, the full answer for it is in the spiritual sense, you have pride and envy. Those are the vices that angels who become demons are gripped with.
Pride and envy.
Pride and envy. Those are the ones. Any use that they make of other vices, they're trying to instill them in a bodily person, but they don't have it themselves because they don't have a body. All right. And we see a sort of assimilation to it by effect only. So a demon of lust incurs it in others, but can't be overcome with lust themselves. All right. But pride and envy. So you can well understand that the principal root, and this is actually exactly what you were getting at, the principal root of hatred of Christ is pride and envy. And pride has to do with one's own authority, and envy has to do with wanting to tear down someone else's sort of excellence. So the first is a sense of superiority. Yeah, if there's no Christ and there's no God, I don't have to take orders from anyone. I'm the highest authority. That's a consummate example of pride. And envy, if he's great and he has glory and people respect him and they revere him, they're even willing to die for him. Well, I'm annoyed that he has that.
Right.
Right. And so now, right, envy is the impeding of the good of another. You don't even want them to have that. The good that Christ, you don't even want him to have those natural goods. Believe it or not, you can't even look at his spiritual goods and desire him to not have those, which are more valuable than whatever the sort of carnal goods you're looking at, but you're just mad on account of the carnal goods.
Right.
So even on account of a lower thing, you're now sinning and vicious in relation to him. But yeah, Christ being the perfect human, right, is obviously going to bring about the height of envy, the sort of consummation of envy, the consummation of pride. You're even going to get the consummation of wrath and vengeance and recrimination. That's Christ on the cross. People say, well, what if he didn't die on the cross? Right? It's a worthwhile question to ask. There's sort of two answers to it. The first answer is the confrontation of God with fallen man direct confrontation was going to lead to it. So whether it happened on that day or 5 days later, it was happening. You can know with a sense of certainty that the conflict that was going to bear wrath to its consummate form, which is the murder of another and a murder of an innocent person, truly innocent person, for the pure sake of sort of wrath, of executing that hatred toward another, right? That was going to happen. But then on a second level, this is the other part of the answer. The flip side of the answer is that it is the cross of Christ that redeems human nature. So when Christ says, I come to do a work, and he says, where I'm going, you cannot follow me. He says this in the Gospel of John, where I'm going, you cannot follow me. And he says, but I go ahead of you. For my Father's house has my Father's mansion has many rooms, and I go to prepare a room for you. So he's saying, you can't come with me now. Not saying you couldn't be crucified next to me, because there's going to be 2 other people crucified next to him. You could die for him and right there, right, all that, but you won't be glorified because there's a work that he's doing. And through that crucifixion, he's going to glorify human nature. He's going to raise it up, and now humans are going to be able to partake of it because he's already divine. He's got the divine part, but human nature hasn't yet atoned for sin. It hasn't yet made right with sin. And this is why they say the fruits of the Christian faith all flow from the cross. And everyone, Protestant, Catholic, they all are solid on that.
Yeah, they agree.
They're very solid on that.
No doubt.
right? And that's the mechanic of what's happening there, is that Christ. And so the twofold answer to what if he didn't get killed? Well, the first answer is it was going to happen. The second answer is that you wouldn't be saved. You wouldn't have salvation. Not because God couldn't work it in another way. He could have. He could have, metaphorically speaking, snapped his fingers and you're just good. However, he chose a more sublime way that draws you into it. All right, that perfects you, your human attributes along the way. Right, and so Dante says this in Paradiso, right? The teens cantos. I don't remember exactly which one, but I think it's in the teens where he talks about the means of atonement that God chooses. He says there were two ways that God could have atoned for our sins. One, he could have done it himself. Second, a human could have achieved a feat of love so great that it would atone for humans. So what does God do? He becomes a human and achieves that feat. He chooses the best of both. He merges them both together. And now what's given back to God on the cross is a love that we couldn't ourselves give, right? And that actually circles up to what I'm alluding to in my Substack post about religion.
Yes. And to end here, because we got AJ has to go and run and get baby Ara. Yeah. Who's a beautiful, beautiful baby there, growing up big, healthy, and strong with the most beautiful crystal blue eyes you've ever seen. AJ Barker, everybody, we appreciate you for being here today for this second Family and Friends guest episode, and I look forward to having you back. I'm sure the audience loved it. I'm sure we have a big Christian audience, and many of them have questions about Catholicism and there's all of these, and we'll get deeper into the missteps of Catholicism, the history of Catholicism, all these things in a future episode, because nobody has a more studied, theological perspective, especially in our age group, than you do.
Thank you.
We talk about these things often, but I know you've taken the time to study and really get that authentic, genuine insight that's not just regurgitating what one's read, but actually synthesizing it, and God put you blessed you to come through the fire. Right, the fire, and sort of build that structure in yourself, that mechanism to be able to give us genuine, authentic insights. So
it's all grace, right? Lest we boast in ourselves. It's all grace. St. Paul lays it out for us. There's a mysterious aspect to it, but there's also an intelligible aspect to it, which is that God gives grace, and it works in people's lives, and he and so whatever good things come through me are the effect of grace, and I hope they are good things, because I'll tell you what, there's also things that aren't so good that come through me, and those I'm responsible for, and I pray that God give me the grace not just to have been justified in baptism, which one who is baptized is justified toward God. They've taken on, all right, that glory that Christ won, that sanctification. They've taken that on. They've now ordained themselves toward God rightly. So it's not just that justification, but that grace of persevering in the faith all the way through to the end. Many are called, but few are chosen. As Christ says in the Gospel of Matthew, you may have received the calling, you may have received the justification, but not the grace of perseverance to the end. So, and that's unknown, right? For me, that's unknown. And to the degree we look at things, well, I've got this going and these things. Yeah, you can build a sort of vague sense of certitude around it. You can get closer. Okay, I think these things are pretty strongly in place. You're not, just totally in the sort of abyss with it, but you don't know. And so, and that grace is unmerited. You can, as St. Paul says, lest grace no longer be grace. It is unmerited. And so I pray and ask all the listeners here, please pray for my perseverance to the end. Not that I might be glorified, but that I might come to know the love of God better, and that we might all share in it, partake in it. That is the reality of heaven. It is the community of those who love God, sharing in the joy of loving God. And God's good is so good that in even being in the presence of God, it infuses you with the glory of God. Right? So
Amen.
that's the hope.
Amen.
Through it.
Amen.
Yeah.
Everybody, I'm harping on Barker to get online and to get in the fray a little bit and share these insights on a daily basis on social media.
Probably
He
won't happen.
is very reluctant, and I respect
Yeah,
that.
right.
But for now, you can find him on Substack. He
Yep.
started a new Substack, and his Substack will be available in a link form in the description here of this podcast video, and we'll make sure that we make it very easy for you to see and find. We want everybody to go and support AJ Barker's Substack. Go read the content, become familiar with Barker and his written works. But definitely follow him on Substack, because for now that's all you got, or you can listen to him
Yeah.
here on this podcast.
That's right.
Any other parting shots for you, my
No,
friend,
I mean,
before you head out?
yeah, don't hold your breath in those Substack posts. They come every once in a while, but I try and really do them well and polish them when I do write them, and I try and be temperate in what I do put out there, so that hopefully it can be one part of a symphony of a person's life, one note in a larger orchestra. I don't need to be the orchestra that someone listens to, and that's what I love about Royce. All these other guys, they're all pieces in a larger puzzle, and the degree that we try and drift away from that and have it all in one place that's not Christ or not God, you're going to fall into error.
No doubt.
Right.
No doubt.
And so it's those bigger things. So anyways, Substack, it's right now, it's titled AJ Barker's The Catholic Muse, is the name I have going for it right now. And it's been up there for the last year. I've kind of more recently kind of crystallized and figured out more what I'm doing with what I evidently did do with it over that first year, and where I think it's going. But yeah, I try and contribute piece every once in a while that I think is interesting, and you can read that there. And if not, if you have any more itching, I ask that you include me in your prayers. That'll suffice.
AJ Barker, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio. We are available on all audio podcast platforms: Apple, Google, Amazon, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. And I hear from our good fans out there in the world that our Apple podcast has over 100 5-star ratings, all 5-star ratings. So we appreciate all of your viewership, obviously, today and in the future, and your listenership today and in the future, and all of the good reports and all of the good feedback we've been getting. I'm ecstatic and happy to be able to bring people like AJ Barker to you, who I have a great relationship with, and a familial sort of relationship with, one that's been formed and matured over countless hours of thought and love and prayer. This is what Family and Friends Friday is all about. Now, I will say that the podcast has taken off in such a quick way that it is very possible that we will be expanding our guest format to include more days during the week, which would mean we would go from 3 to 4, because we got great guests like AJ, who just pop in on a Friday, a snow day, when here in Minnesota we got school canceled, and he had some free time today. So no better time than a good snow day to have a good conversation like this and get it to you guys. But we got great guests coming in the future, potentially Carrie Lake on deck, Steve Bannon, the wonderful and beautiful uprising Christina Caramo there in Michigan, who took on the Uniparty and has come back to win the Republican Party chair there in Michigan in grand fashion. What an awe-inspiring feat. And a bunch of other people, the great Jason Whitlock. I mean, the lineup is going to get wild, and I think we're going to have to add another guest day. But AJ, thanks for being here today, brother. I love you. Godspeed to you today out there on the road. Be safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
Love you too, brother.